Welcome to the OBR streaming network. This is a brand new, actually live edition of Things I Think I Know. You've been asking for it, so we are delivering. My name is Brad Warren. The man next to me is Quincy Carrier. You can follow him on Twitter at KWEN_C Quincy. What's up, Q? What's going on, man?
Nah, nothing much. Enjoying the off season. It's interesting. It is the off season. The Browns aren't playing games anymore, but feels like we're more engaged than it was at the end of the regular season.
It's like a whole new group of interesting narratives have come to light. The real season has begun, as and it's hyperbolic every year. I said this last night when I was talking to Casey. You say all the time, "Oh, this is the biggest, this is the most important off season ever for the Browns," right? I feel like I say that every year. It's up there. This off season is definitely up there in importance of how they proceed, I would think.
Yeah.
Interesting game last night. Drew Aller kind of showing why he is going back to school. There was some hope from people out there, Q, that he would make a miraculous run to the national championship and decide to come out in this draft. I still think if his agent talked him into it, he would go in the top 5, don't you think?
In this year's draft,
Yeah.
The issue with this year's draft is he's somebody who would benefit from quarterback frenzy, right? And I don't think there's enough quarterbacks in this draft for teams to go crazy. I think this is me personally, I've shared my theory on it. I think this is a bear year to be a quarterback and to get super high draft odds here. I just think by the time we get to the end of this process, I just find it hard to believe that teams will be so quarterback desperate that they're going to manufacture guys into the top 10 in the way that it would need to be right now. Because I don't think any of these prospects are justifiable. And even Drew Aller, who I like as what he could be, he's like second round justifiable. But jumping that all the way up to an early first round, I think that'd give a lot of GMs Blake Bortles flashbacks when he had that run in UCF, and then it kind of turned into what it turned into. I think if you're a Browns fan also, you should consider this.
Yeah.
It's a better situation for you if there's as many quarterback prospects in 2026 as possible. Because maybe you don't get Arch Manning if he goes out, has a good year, decides to declare for the draft, right? There's a chance that Arch Manning ends up in the 2027 class, a stronger than average chance that happens, right? But you want there to be 5, 6 draftable quarterbacks in that draft class because who knows what the Browns will be picking. It'll give them flexibility on what they need to move up to get a pick or to get a guy, or maybe they have just a good enough season where they're still in position to be able to take somebody with their natural pick. So it's not a horrible thing that Drew Aller went back to school here, because if he plays well, maybe he goes and becomes a top overall pick. Maybe he's somebody who you can get at 10 or 12 next year, right? Same thing with Kate Klubnik. We'll see how the board shakes out. There's going to be a quarterback that emerges over the next college football season that we're not even thinking about that will likely be at the top of this conversation or around the top of this conversation. So there's a lot to think about there, but you want as many quarterback prospects in that 2026 draft class as possible if you want to solve the problem in 2026. I don't know if it felt like it'd be too early for Aller to come out because let's face it, he gets drafted to Cleveland number 2 overall. He's going to have to play early. He's not ready for that in the NFL.
Yeah. No, he's not ready for sure. I was thinking because of it is such a weak class and teams are going to be thirsty to get their guy that he might get, I know he's not ready now, but he will have, at least it appears that he'll have all the tools at some point to be a starting quarterback if he continues his, evolution as a young quarterback. So it's
but
interesting.
A team that desperate to get a quarterback, I think we also need to factor in they're going to want somebody with a lot of experience, right? Which is why I think Cam Ward pops up a lot. Cam Ward's played a ton of football. and he has the tools, right? My issue is how he applies those tools has been more
Yeah.
than problematic for me. But yeah, I think somebody like that would be more appealing than like Drew Aller, who is a more sit and develop kind of player, right? Like if you're a GM and you need a quarterback to hit on a quarterback to save your job, Drew Aller's not going to do, like, you can't draft Drew Aller because he's not going to pop up quick enough for
No.
you to be able to put your hat on that one, right?
Yeah.
Somebody like Cam Ward or Shador, if they're good, they're probably going to be closer to what they're going to be in their career year one than like a Drew Aller would be.
All right. So things I think I know. Where are you at with the quarterbacks in this class? Like, I've started doing some of the quarterback work, and I think at this point, and I'm about halfway through their games. I think that the Browns will be very cautious to take either of these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree?
I think they're going to do their due diligence, right? And you're going to hear a lot of reports that the Browns are poking around at quarterback, and they should, because you should look into quarterback if you want to draft a quarterback, and you should look at that quarterback, especially if you don't think you should draft the quarterback, right? When you have the number 2 overall pick, when there are two not top prospects, but two guys that people are saying are above the rest of the class, you got to do your your research on them and be absolutely sure if you want to move back on them, because you can't be wrong about those two. So yeah, they're going to do every bit of research possible to look into this class and to make sure that if they don't want to take one of these guys, they are 100% okay with that, or as close to 100% okay they can be. That being said, if you're asking me what this class has, I would compare it to this. I think if you look at this class in terms of like what past prospects have been, Cam Ward is Zach Wilson as a prospect, right? Very similar to him, same concerns, right? Pretty erratic throwing the ball, tremendous arm talent, right? The physical talent's there. It's more about how you apply those traits and if those habits can be broken, and if that play style can be useful in the NFL. So it's like Zach Wilson, and with Shador, it'd be like drafting Teddy Bridgewater in 2014, right? Guy who smart player, can process things. The question is, when it speeds up, what does it look like? Is he going to be as accurate in the NFL as he is in college football? And what is the upside long term, right? Is this somebody who, if he hits, he can be maybe as good as like Geno Smith? So we're talking about like a tier 3, sometimes tier 2 quarterback. Is that what you want to spend a second overall pick on? And that's the best case scenario on him, right?
Yeah.
I tend to lean towards I need a guy to at least be tier 2 if I'm going to draft him that early, right? Like a comfortable tier 2 quarterback, like Justin Herbert, right? You would draft Justin Herbert number 2 overall.
Yes.
But
I would take him number 1 overall.
Probably. Yeah, like that's the caliber of quarterback that you need. Like obviously Joe Burrow, Pat Mahomes, Lamar Jackson in that same class, right? But like if you're looking for guys who aren't the tip of the top, that's somebody you could throw out there as another example. So that's how I look at this class. I don't think either of those bets feel right for the Cleveland Browns at quarterback. And, there are some bets that do feel right at other positions for the Cleveland Browns that I think would make them a better team long-term than taking a chance on a quarterback who might not hit.
Abdul Carter was impressive last night playing with an injured shoulder. Is he one of those guys for you?
He is the guy.
He is the guy.
Yeah, that is the guy. I know people are concerned, right? I saw people dusting off the old school 3-4-4-3 arguments about Abdul Carter. Look, first of all, most NFL defenses these days are multiple, so it doesn't really matter if you're a 3-4-4-3 guy. You're going to run both in the NFL. And here's the beauty of Abdul Carter. Yeah, does he fit as a 3-4 edge? Absolutely. Can he play wide 9 in a Jim Schwartz scheme? Absolutely. Can he mug the A gap like a linebacker? Yes, he can do that. Yeah. Like if you have a defensive coordinator and that defensive coordinator says, hey, this guy, I don't know what to do with him. Fire him. Seriously, Fire
Yeah.
the defensive
Yeah.
coordinator, because if
Do
he can't
anything with
figure
him.
out
Yeah.
somewhere to put him, then he's virtually useless. No, there's going to be a million different places to do it. You got to use a little bit of creativity to understand how he's going to be used, right? Micah Parsons coming out, people had these same complaints. Oh, he's not big enough, this and that. He's a 3-4 edge. Doesn't matter. I don't even know what Dallas runs. I'm pretty sure it's a 4-3. It doesn't matter, man. Like
You can't tell half the
yeah,
time. Yeah.
and half the time, the way you use Miles would be similar to how you use Abdul Carter, right? You move him
Yeah.
around. Now imagine having two pieces you can do that with. Imagine having Miles Garrett and Abdul Carter mug the A gap in a nickel set, and you have two other edges in Alex Wright and IMAC that you feel good about putting on the outside there, right?
Yeah.
They can contain on this. There's so much you could do. You got Michael Hall to play with there. I think he's going to be, by the time we get to the end of the draft process, as long as he doesn't have anything come up in his personal or in his medical, he's going to be the number one overall prospect in this class. And if a quarterback doesn't go 1, then I think he will. But if he gets to you at 2, it's got to be a pretty nice offer for me to move off of.
It's interesting. I feel similarly. I think that he's a very special player. I have things I think I know about. It's kind of controversial about Travis Hunter. I wanted to run past you. So it's weird, and I brought this up before, but I don't think I brought it up to you. That my thought on him is he's such a special player, right? Obviously. But part of what makes him so special is that he does it on both sides of the ball. And is that really feasible in the NFL? And if it is, it's probably that he's a defender and you maybe have a couple packages for him on the offensive side of the ball or whatever, right? It's kind of rare to do it the opposite way where you play offense and then come in on defense. I don't think anybody's ever really done that. But like, if you're a team and you're sitting there at 2 or 3 or 4 in the range where they're projecting Travis Hunter to go, and you really need you want a wide receiver, right?
Mm-hmm.
What wouldn't you just take the best available wide receiver? Like, or if you want a corner, wouldn't you just take the best available corner? And in those instances, he's neither. Part of what makes him, well, I mean, you can argue that he's neither. I think most people think that the best corner is Will Johnson. And I think most people think the best wide receiver is Tet, right? But I guess that's in the eyes of the beholder. But if you think that those guys are a better wide receiver or a better corner, you just take one or the other, because I don't think it's feasible in the NFL for him to play 85% of the snaps. So the novelty that he was in college doesn't translate for me.
Yeah, Travis is a difficult one to project, right?
Yeah.
Uber talented. I personally do think he's the best wide receiver and the best corner in this draft class.
Really?
Yeah, like he's that talented as a wide receiver and he's that talented as a corner. Here's the thing with Travis, right? If he can be your number 2 corner and you're like third option on offense, then he's absolutely worth whatever pick you take him, because you're filling 2 positions, right? So that to me is the question. Can he play both sides in the NFL? I don't think the cardio of it is the concern, more so than the physicality of that. Is like, nobody's ever tried to do it. If somebody could do it, it would probably be this kid. I think it comes down to this. The team that drafts Travis Hunter, similar to a quarterback, has to be willing to commit to that, right? Like, I don't think you can come in and draft Travis Hunter and have a half plan for him, right? Like, if you come in there and you're like, you're going to use him on some, I think Jabril Peppers is a smaller test case of this, obviously not as successful at this as Travis Hunter is, but he was a 2-way guy in college too at Michigan. And the problem with Jabril was that nobody was ever willing to commit to use him in the multiple ways that you have to use him. And Reggie Bush is a similar one, right? Where it's like, all these teams tried to get like a little bit of here with Reggie and a little bit there with Reggie, but you end up just underutilizing a player that way and feeling underwhelmed by the overall impact of him. And if you go into it with Travis Hunter and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to draft him to play corner and we're going to do some gimmicky stuff on offense with him, or you do vice versa where you have him play wide receiver full time and you do some gimmicky stuff at corner, then I think you're not going to get the full value of him. You're going to end up feeling a little bit disappointed. But
Do you think he can do both, like almost full time?
I think there's a way you can do it. How specifically that looks, I wouldn't know, right? That's what they get paid the big bucks to do in the NFL. But the talent is most certainly there. Like he can play both sides. Cardio wise, it isn't that difficult of a task when you think about how much slower the NFL pace is versus college football. Like I think Pat Shermer made the point about it being less plays. It's more about durability with him, right? Like, and there are ways you can run him on specific routes where he's not likely to get hit, and you can put him on the boundary. If you put him on the boundary as a corner, he's probably going to stay healthier longer because it's just less physical, right? But if you try to play him at like slot because he has great zone instincts, which he can do, and then you like run him at the slot on the other side, you're begging for injuries to happen. Or if you just run him out there on gimmicks, you're begging for injuries to happen. So you kind of got to commit to Travis Hunter the same way a franchise would have to commit to a quarterback to really get the full use out of him. And I think that's going to be the hold, right? Do you have a defense and offensive staff that are willing to come together and say, hey, we're going to let this guy be this guy? If you do that, I think there's a chance that he's going to be well worth that top 5 pick. But if you're not willing to do that, then this is probably something you should stay away from, because you're probably going to, because then it ends up being a slash guy. And I talk about this all the time. The slash guys in the draft have a bad history of paying off, right? Remember Isaiah Simmons, the Swiss Army knife and all that. I always get nervous when I hear that, especially in the top 5, because usually if you don't have a clear vision for a player, that player's development suffers because of it. And Travis Hunter has a lot of visions that you can look for. And he has a very broad talent base and he could do a lot of things. But if you get too caught up in that and you try to make him do all of these things, or you like either you sit down and you say he's either a wide receiver, he's either a corner and nothing else, and you just have him train that, or you commit to having him play both sides. That's what I'm trying to say in the long term.
Yeah.
Right.
But
you gotta have a clear plan for him. If you have a clear plan for him, I think as long as you make a decision, he will be fine. He will be a good player. He might not be somebody who you feel like overwhelmingly should have been the pick that he should have. But if you can find a way to make it work both sides, he will absolutely be worth it because he is that talented.
Yeah, interesting case. You're the first person that said that you think he's the best at both in this draft, which is very interesting. All right. Hey, Q, I think Dylan Gabriel as a second round would be worth it. Thoughts?
No.
No.
No,
not a Gabriel fan, right?
I like Gabriel, not in the second round. I like Gabriel 4th, 5th, 6th. Here's how I view this, right? There's Shador and there is Cam Ward. Those are the guys who have a chance to be a starter. Like if they work, they could be a starter. There's a lot of downside to them, but those are the guys who have a chance, I think, in my mind, to be a starter. Then there are guys who like Jalen Milroe, no idea what he's going to be. And I don't even know if he's going to be like a full-time quarterback in the NFL, right? I think he should play. I think he has to be at the quarterback position to do a lot of things that he does well in the run game. So you can't just put him at wide receiver or something like that. But he's a complete unknown. Everybody else in this class, you hope could be a backup, right? Like if they are something more than that, then cool. But you would be drafting them with the hopes of like, hey, maybe they could fulfill what DTR didn't and develop into a backup quarterback.
Yep.
And you don't go into it thinking any more than that. If they surprise you in camp and they end up being your starter, kind of like how Russ and guys like Dak Prescott did, awesome, cool. You just landed on the gold mine and we're off to the moon and we're excited. But you should draft these guys expecting them to be backups for the most part after those two guys specifically.
All right. What was in here they are asking about did DW I wanted to talk to you about this for a minute. DW turned his ankle rehabbing or partying in Miami. It might have been a TikTok dance, Tactical Bacon. I'm not sure, but they did say he rolled his ankle. He has fully re-ruptured it. He is undergoing surgery again. Dang. And we talked about it like, hey, is he just trying to save face? No, man, he re-ruptured this thing. He's out. I mean, honestly, you never wish injury on anybody, but it gets him out of the picture for 2025. And for that, I'm somewhat grateful.
Well, he was already out the picture, in my opinion, for 2025.
Agreed.
Yeah. So, and I knew something could go wrong. I think I mentioned this when it first popped up and people were like having these conspiracy theories about the Browns faking it or something like that. And I was like, I don't know, man. He was out that boot really early.
Yeah.
Right. Like he was out the boot super early. And I think my assumption is, because I think a lot of people's assumption with Deshaun is like he doesn't want to play football. And I get how people get there. But I look at it from his point of view, and I think he needs to play football in order to have his life resemble anything that it looked like back when he was in Houston, right? So I would assume he is very motivated to try to get on the field at all costs. And I think this is more of a result of him being overly aggressive on the rehab thing. Now we'll find out, right? Because he's trying to get back in July, right? And he wants to think about this, compete for the job in July. That was the tale being told, right? And we kind of knew it was a bit of a farce, and maybe they were selling him that farce, but he probably had no choice but to believe in that farce. Because think about it. How is he going to compete for a job in July? You tore your Achilles in October, right?
You're not.
Like, there's no shot you're going to be at a point to where you're fully ready to go all the way in and compete for a starting job against a veteran quarterback. There's no shot that you're going to be set up to do that. But he tried to probably get ready as soon as possible, right? Probably trying to be able to throw the football by June. And he probably pushed it too hard and rolled his ankle. I mean, it's something that could happen. I don't think it's common, but I don't think it's like unheard of, right? Now, if he was screwing around, which I doubt, I think he knows how much money is on the line there to be screwing around. And he hasn't indicated that he like is Le'Veon Bell level of irresponsible, right? I think that's the only guy I can see recently who has done like the void my contract because I want the jet ski stuff, right? He hasn't been like, say what you want about Deshaun Watson. You can say a lot of things about Deshaun. That has not been one of the issues with him where he's just doing whatever in his free time, right? So I doubt it's something like that. But if it is, then, I mean, you get even more cap relief. But if it wasn't clear for the Browns before this, then it ought to be crystal clear. You're moving on from the Deshaun Watson era. And now he will not play. He's almost guaranteed not to play 2025, which makes your salary cap life just a smidge easier. And now, this starts the offseason of moving on from that era. And it's going to be interesting because I don't think moving on from that, like usually you want to just have a clean break and go after a new quarterback. And I think that's why a lot of people want to make a big swing at quarterback this year. But I just don't think you got that option on the table if you're the Browns.
Yeah. I think a lot of us were already there, but the national narrative was always going to be that he was going to come back and compete, right? And at least
he's under contract.
He's under contract. They're going to have to play him. So that is that. The Ohio State game is about to kick off against Texas tonight. Do you expect this to be close at all, Q?
I don't, but the fact that nobody expects this to be close makes me suspicious about the outcome of this game. The one thing I will point out that I have thought about, look, there is one team in the playoffs that has the corners to really match up with Ohio State. Well, two teams, and that's Notre Dame and especially Texas, right? Texas has a couple guys I think are going to be good draft guys, Jahdae Barron and Makuba. So they're a bit more equipped to handle the strength that Ohio State can throw at them. The issue that Texas has is I don't trust that their offense can be consistent enough to keep up with Ohio State if Ohio State decides to fire on all cylinders. So
Yeah.
that is the issue that Texas has in this game. They're not as talented as Ohio State either. I think Ohio State is much more talented than them. But also Texas does have a really good offensive line, right? Like they're going to be able to hold up better against Ohio State than, some of these other teams have been able to hold up against them. But Oregon had a really good offensive line. It didn't end up mattering, right?
No doubt.
So unless Ryan Day does the thing where he decides he wants to run the ball 50 times and play into his weaknesses,
Michigan
I think Texas will lose. I think Ohio State will win. But yeah, it'd be pretty hard for Ohio State to drop this game to Quinn Ewers and the Texans, and because I just don't think they're as good of a team as Ohio State is right now.
It's got to be so hard for a Texas fan because you got to be like inside wanting to see Arch. Like, they feels like they've been kind of like trying to handle Ewers with baby gloves a little bit last week, and
you know what it reminds me of?
What?
Were you a fan of Ohio State during the Tressel years?
I watched him. I followed him closely.
You remember Tim Beckman?
Yes.
So Tim Beckman used to start. And you had Terrell Pryor.
Yep.
This number one recruit. It was the first time Ohio State got like the number one recruit in the country at the quarterback position. Terrell Pryor out of Penn. Well, he was supposed to go to Penn State, but out of not Philadelphia, but Pennsylvania. And like Tress refused to play Terrell Pryor that year. As much as everybody else wanted, because he felt like it was Beckman's turn to be able to lead the team. And like, to Beckman's credit, they didn't make to the national championship game, got absolutely smacked by LSU that year. And Nick Saban, like when he was at LSU, so it makes me feel old. But yeah, it reminds me of that. They got that kind of thing going on at Texas, where it's like he wants to reward seniority, especially in an era of college football where that is not in vogue and that does not get rewarded as much, and guys hit the portal and stuff. He wants to reward loyalty and be loyal to his guys. And I think that's a huge part of his overall recruitment strategies. Hey, I'm going to stay loyal to you. I'm going to develop you. I'm not going to give up on you just because it's convenient. I think that's what Stark is trying to sell there at Texas. But in order to sell it, you got to keep Quinn Ewers out there. So like, it's not like he doesn't really have the option to bench him, right? Because if he does, it goes back on everything that he is trying to build there at Texas.
Yep. It'll be interesting. I'm sure they'll have at least a package for Arch in. They've been trying to run him in here and there, and it'll be interesting to see how they handle that tonight. All right, let's go to this question.
A successful quarterback package ever in the history of football?
I don't know. Occasionally there's the package that gets like an athlete on the field, and he not usually not over a large sample size. I would agree with that.
Yeah,
occasionally
you get like a couple hot weeks with the package, right? But after a while, it's like it just turns into this nothing thing, and take your quarterback off the field on third down.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a weird thing, that hard thing to do. All right, so we were going to go to this anyways, but Ben wants to know our thoughts. What do you think about the offensive coordinator search and its candidates in what Stefanski wants to do? Interested in your thoughts. And then we were also going to mention real quickly, obviously they hired Mike Bloomgren as the offensive line coach. Basically, if you peel back all the layers of his career, he spent some time with Bill Callahan. And I think they spoke to him last year, and he wasn't ready to leave Rice head coaching job.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a guy that's been on their radar for a while and feels like a Callahan disciple at the O-line coach thing, which for me drops a couple breadcrumbs in the direction we're going. But what are your thoughts on OC? Do you have a guy that you want in particular?
So the Bloomgren thing, right? I think is interesting because he got fired in October, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah. I wonder if that is the reason why we saw so little of Andy Dickerson around the offense.
They knew it, like we said this last night. Yeah, they knew he was coming. It was like, this is Mike's job. Andy, go do whatever the hell you want. Just because at the end of the year it's over.
Yeah, it kind of felt like that, where it's like, well, they kind of got Andy somehow got the word that they were going to just fire him anyway at the end of the year. And maybe
Yep.
that affected his attitude towards his work and why, it didn't seem like he was interested and they were interested in him doing anything with the offensive line going
No.
forward. And also, I think there's a legitimate chance that the offensive line room just straight up revolted at some point, right? Because they seem very unhappy with what they were asked to do and how they were asked to play in order to sustain this Watson thing. I think that was something that was maybe maintainable for like a month. But once
Yeah.
we got to the point where we knew Watson wasn't going to be good, then
Yeah.
I think these guys were like, hey, why are we doing this? We need to change this. And they started pushing back on it. And it just made it to where it's like, okay, let's just put some guys who are used to the Kubiak style in that offensive line room to appease these guys. And that's why it was Vrabel and Stefanski, who both have experience with the West Coast offense. Those pieces are now making sense
Yep.
with this hire. So it seems like that was going to be the hire no matter what. But offensive coordinator, look, when we go into these coordinator hires, I think it's real easy to get caught up into a name and kind of have all your expectations be layered to a name. I try to stay away from that, right? Like, I want to know what a guy who's coming in, what their experience is, and what they're bringing to the table. And does that align with what I feel like the team needs? I want somebody who has a lot of overlap with what Kevin knows in the Kubiak
Yep.
style, the West Coast style, but also who can add new elements to it, right? Have they worked with different branches of that Kubiak system? The problem with Ken Dorsey is that you were going from two completely different trees and trying to like mesh it together. Felt like you were running two offenses at times. But if you bring in somebody who has a little bit of experience with what Josh McDaniels does, maybe a little bit of experience with what Kyle Shanahan does, or maybe the flavor of it that Matt LaFleur or Kevin O'Connell, right, can bring some of those elements in to help refresh this or come up with their own ideas. Maybe that's something that you look for, somebody who's creative, right? Because I think creativity is another key. You want overlap with what Stefanski knows and creativity within that framework. Because if I'm looking for things that Kevin has demonstrated that he doesn't do well, I don't think he's a very creative guy, right? When it's time for him to get creative, the results are not always amazing, right? Like sometimes he does some creative stuff, but a lot of times it's not what you want, or if you want to bring in somebody who has a better job of guessing where trends are going in the NFL, because I don't think Kevin has a great track record of doing that. What I think Kevin does really well is he can institute a system, implement a system really well, and then put a system in place that makes it easy to play quarterback for your team, right? And put in these like reads and has clever ways of making it an easier defense to read and having easier checks. I think he's really good at that. But the innovation part of that, I don't think he does as well. So I think you need to bring in somebody who's willing to be a little creative. They think outside the box, but remember the box is the West Coast offense, right?
Yes.
Like make sure we're staying in that framework. That's what I'm looking for. So whatever names they find that can fit that list, because look, there might be a quarterback coach there that I've never heard of. And that might be the perfect guy for the job. I don't want to poo-poo on that guy because they're not the name that I wanted, right? So I try to keep my eye on like what are the traits that I want to see in a coach that gets brought in for that role. And then once they make that hire, evaluating whether this guy has the experience or has demonstrated the ability to live up to those traits, right? I think Kubiak's a natural name that comes up. Obviously, we talked a lot about the Kubiak system. One of his sons might be a good name to go after. Josh McCown is another name that comes up. I don't know how creative he is because he's not really had a chance to do that. But you do know he's been somebody who's been highly thought of when it comes to leadership and everything else like that. And if you're Kevin and you feel like you need kind of that former player, veteran leadership kind of presence in the quarterback room and in the locker room, maybe Josh McCown, somebody you gravitate to. Also have to ask the question, what is Kevin looking for in an offensive coordinator, right? Is this a glorified quarterbacks coach position? Is this a passing game coordinator position? Like what is it that he wants and needs out this role? Because then I could see how Josh McCown can make sense in different ways of doing it. But yeah, it's gonna be a position that the job description of it changes throughout the course of the year. So you got to be flexible of how you want to judge it. But, since we know that it's going to be Kevin's offense, Kevin's going to be the de facto offensive coordinator on some form. Like if the offense stinks this year, Kev's getting fired for it, right? Like that's what it's going to be. This is Kevin's offense again. So, I'm not really worried about the coordination part of it. I just want somebody who can help collaborate with him a little bit better than what has been there, because I do think the one thing that Ken Dorsey did help with was that they were able to create a lot more explosive plays than they were in the old offense.
Yes. Agreed. Yeah, I think we're headed. I'm on the same page as you. I think we're headed back into a full Stefanski here. But I think what you need to do with this OC candidate is you've got to. I totally agree with you. You need to be able to modernize what you've been doing or evolve what he has been doing. Like just the usage of motion is being done so well in places like Minnesota and Miami and other places where and the Browns haven't been at the forefront of that. And that's something I'd like to see, somebody that could come in and get creative with that. Because it just provides such an advantage at times to out leverage guys with motion, unwrap defenses before pre-snap, all those things. So somebody that can do that, somebody like you said that is creative and will keep this offense at the cutting edge while still remaining right in Stefanski's lane. So I agree with you wholeheartedly there. So, and Kubiak is an interesting name. McCown is definitely an interesting name. Somebody asked in the chat what tree he came. He doesn't really come from a tree. I was just looking. I mean, he played so many teams in the NFL. It's unbelievable. Played for like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Yeah,
13
Josh
different...
McCown's tree would be whoever hires him next,
yes.
Right? Like that's going to be like if he gets hired by Kevin, he's not bringing a tree in, right? Like he is there to learn from Kevin, and he's there because Kevin thinks he's creative enough to, once he learns this offense, he knows the offense. He's played like a million different offenses, but once he learns how to coordinate for this offense, he can add things to the collaboration process. So that would be the appeal, I think, for Josh McCown, is that he is kind of a open tub of clay that you can kind of mold into what you want into being, instead of being set into different offensive philosophies like some more established guys would be.
And that he spent time with Kevin O'Connell too, who is tremendous and is doing some really interesting stuff with their offense in Minnesota. So he brings some of that too, which I think is great. So a lot of interesting candidates. Last thing we'll hit before we get out of here, because I know this game is kicking. What's the or it's probably already kicked. Where are you at with Tommy Rees? I mean, he's the hot name. Do you feel he's like, the thing with him is maybe his creativity, right?
I have no idea.
We don't know.
Because I go back and I'm like, I don't think he was great at Alabama when he was the offensive coordinator there. There must be something about how this man works behind the scenes, and they'll have to explain that if they hire him at his introductory conference, that there's just something about him that they like a lot, and maybe we'll get more insight there. I don't really know what to think of Tommy Rees, to be honest, but I would say this with anybody that they hire, especially if they hire somebody who's more on the less experience in the NFL caliber offensive coordinator, they're not going to be leading the offense, right? Like Kevin's going to be leading the offense. They're going to be working under Kevin. So some of the concerns I might have for Tommy Rees might be if he was left to his own desires. But if he's working with Kevin and this is under Kevin's leadership and he's just adding things to it, then maybe that can work out easier. I think there's a better chance of this offensive coordinator just being fine in that role, because ultimately, look, Alex Van Pelt was fine right?
Yep.
And that was just basically the same exact
Yep.
role that Kevin had. Now I think AVP was brought in to make sure that Kevin had the experience he needed on the staff when he was first brought in 2020, and also somebody he's familiar with. I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest with you, Brad, if they went the exact opposite direction, which is, hey, let's get somebody young who has new ideas, presumably, and let them have an imprint on this offense, because it feels like we're a little bit set in our 2007, Kubiak bag
Very much
here.
so. Yeah.
So let's get a guy who's more receptive to, hey man, they're doing this weird little thing with this motion. Let's throw that in there and see what happens. Whereas if you get a more traditional guy, he doesn't want to do that, right? I've seen Kubiak guys getting fights over pregame motion with their head coaches and stuff. So it happens all the time. I think what Matt Canada happened with Orgeron at LSU.
That's awesome. No, they have not interviewed Kubiak yet. The name has been thrown around, or both Kubiaks are, I guess, in play here.
I thought the one Kubiak got a promotion from San Francisco.
Okay. Yeah, Clay
got promoted to, I think, offensive coordinator. At least they said he expect to promote him.
Okay, so there you go. So he's probably staying, and then Clint. I would assume they would interview at some point here. I think there may be some. I don't know if he's technically still under contract or what's going on with.
I don't think New Orleans wants to give him up. So it might be a bit of a fight there if you want to go get him.
Yeah, you're gonna have to wait and see what happens there. So interesting though, really good stuff. And as always, great to talk with you, Q. Any parting words for our fan base that got the first live version of things I think I know tonight?
Hey, remember that the second overall pick isn't the only pick you have to help fix things with the team. Right. I see a lot of people, how we got these problems and that problem and this problem. How's that solve that? Well, it makes your team better if you draft a really good player, number 2 overall, right? So like if you get a good player there, it's going to help you out. But if you're worried about offense, you don't got to fix all of that with the number 2 overall pick. There's no pick you're going to select that's going to fix every problem that you have. You got the second round, you got the third round, you got great picks in the second round, third round. You got 4 top 100 picks, 5 top 100 picks in this year's draft. You have a lot of opportunity to add a lot of talent. Free agency, right? We've been so wrapped up in the draft, we haven't even talked about free agency. Browns just made it clear they're going to open up a ton of cap space for free agency this year. Now, I don't think they're going to spend like crazy. They're not going to go in there like John Dorsey say, like drunken sailors, and just buy up the whole lot or nothing like that. But they're going to add some solid players in some positions of need to get this team better.
Got to. Good stuff. All right, and a great point too. People fighting over the second pick like it's the only one that ever existed. So
it's like, we got to fix the offense with this. We got to fix the defense with this. We got to get a quarterback. It's like, hey, let's just meet the draft where it is and just take a good player when they're available.
There you go. You're going to have another one at what, 33, 34?
33. No, 33, I think it is, right? I think it swaps for the second round, right? With the
that's right. Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. All right, good stuff. For Quincy Carrier, follow him on Twitter at Quinn_C. My name is Brad Ward. This has been a new edition of Things I Think I Know, a live one. And get over to the OBR.com. Make sure you check out everything going over there. Our insiders are working overtime to get the scoop on everything going on with these coaching searches and this critical offseason. So with that, enjoy the game tonight. Thanks for watching. Hit like and subscribe on your way out. And have next show will be Monday. We'll be back to our full schedule, Docs Committee, with next week with newly joined Jeff Lloyd at 6 p.m. Quincy Carrier live at 7 on Monday. So tune in for that. And then the rest of the schedule falls into place after that. And I'll get it posted on socials as well at the OBR. Have a wonderful evening. We're out.